Hello and welcome to my short introductory webinar on getting a new role. I'm going to talk through today some of the considerations you need to have in mind as you start to think about going for a new role. I'm going to switch my camera off so you can focus entirely on the slides and what I'm going to be saying. So for those of you that don't know, I'm Joanna Gaudoin and I run Inside Out Image, and everything I do is about helping individuals progress their careers and companies improve their performance and have competitive edge by working with their people to develop all the other non-technical skills they need to progress for their own careers, but also for their organisation. I focus on working with people on their personal impact and their relationship management skills in every professional scenario. So thinking about how individuals communicate themselves on behalf of themselves and their company, and how they build relationships with others, whether that be in scenarios such as job interviews, presenting at networking events, or day-to-day in the office. I tend to work mainly with people who have a lot of technical knowledge and have perhaps passed lots of exams, but need to work on the other skills that sit around and support this baseline. This short webinar is going to cover three key elements. Firstly, preparing yourself for the market, thinking about what materials you need. Secondly, having a strategy and a plan. So how are you going to put yourself actually into the market and make change happen? And thirdly, impact to interview. So thinking about how you come across and ultimately get through interview stages to get a new role. This is a really important topic and one that I cover as part of my 9 skills. The reason for that is people can often have had a very successful career, but don't move on at appropriate times, whether that be internally or externally. I hear of many clients talking about situations where a job opportunity has come up, perhaps through their network, but because it's so long since they've worked on their CV or their LinkedIn profile or thought anything about going out to the job market, they don't go for it because they feel like they don't have the time. What's really good to do if you can is to create a good baseline CV and LinkedIn profile, even when you're not job hunting, so that you've got them in a good state and they actually help to put you forward. If you think about LinkedIn, people might find that and therefore identify you for an opportunity. And also when you have a specific opportunity you want to go for, they just need some minor updating. So it's well worth thinking about how prepared you are if an opportunity comes up. Well, let's imagine for the sake of today that you are thinking about going for a new role, whether that be internal or external. Even internally these days, very often you need to submit a CV, so that's something worth considering. So thinking about your application material, so I've got 3 things in mind here. There's your CV, your LinkedIn profile, and then sometimes you need to have cover letters. Now, these are variable, you don't always need them, but they are something I've helped some clients with. Your CV, so fundamentally, this needs to act as a good record of things you've done to highlight your key experience, expertise, and skills. But what it really needs to do is to be a hook. It needs to get people interested enough that they then want to meet you. That is really key. So how do you stand out well in your CV? So I'm just going to cover some top tips at this point, things to consider. So don't make your CV too long. I see far too many CVs that are onto 3 or 4 pages. People just won't read all of that. And I see people have crammed it all in as well. How can you space out your experience and expertise so that people actually want to read it across a couple of sides of A4? It's not good just to have a list of skills or a list of adjectives about yourself at the start as a summary. You want to ideally have a paragraph, doesn't have to be too long, to highlight who you are and what you're great at. But lists of adjectives anyone can do. It needs to have some support for those within it. After you've got a meaningful summary, you then want to have your experience and expertise detailed through your job history. So highlighting the key things you've been responsible for and the major achievements you've had. You of course need something on your education, and then usually finish with something on any languages that you have in addition to English and any interests you have. So a little bit of the human aspect. So the big thing to remember is make your CV readable so that if a human being picks it up, they actually want to read it. It doesn't look like it's going to be a nightmare to drag through. Your LinkedIn profile then needs to look really good. It needs to stand out from others. You need to have a great photo. You, of course, need to have everything up to date with your experience and expertise. It's not just a dump of your CV online, it's a representation. So you would take elements from your CV and put those online. So highlighting the key things there. You then want to try and fill out some of the other profile elements so that you get noticed. And a key thing is to have over 500 connections, as there's something in the algorithm on LinkedIn, I don't know why, that helps people to show up in searches if they've got over 500 connections. So think about how you can increase that. And most people can by thinking about former colleagues, current colleagues, clients, people they went to university with. Getting that right so that people who go and find you by name, it ties in with your CV and what else they might know about you. And equally, people doing searches in your area of expertise are able to find you cold. This is very often how people do have opportunities that they wouldn't have otherwise had in the job market. So think very carefully about what information you're putting on display. When I work with my clients, what I do is I reinvent both the CV and the LinkedIn profile. So I rewrite them from scratch. It's not about tweaking an existing CV. It's about listening to someone talk about their career history and bringing out the key elements from that. Because what's interesting is people often talk about it in a very different way to how they might type about it from their own head. So bringing out that passion and what people are really good at and want to be invited into interview to talk about are key elements. And of course, there's the cover letter, which, if appropriate, that needs work to position yourself well, highlight what you're really good at, and importantly, why you're great for the job. Somebody asked me the other day if there's an option of a cover letter, should I take it? I would say if you're applying for something that's a bit different and maybe your CV isn't an obvious fit, you should definitely do the cover letter to express why you think you are actually a good fit for the role. So that's application materials, and spending time carefully on those is an essential first step because they are what are going to position you in the market. And try and be focused, because if you're trying to go for too many different types of roles, you won't get selected for any. So really think about what you want to highlight carefully in those materials. Secondly, you need a strategy and a plan. So a little bit like I was just talking about having a focus, have a job search strategy, and that has two elements. The first element is thinking about what are your criteria for a new role. What do you really want in a new role and what do you really don't want? And this is both about the content of the role. Do you want to be a line manager or not? Do you want to be managing certain areas? Do you want to work on certain types of projects? And it's also about the practicalities of the role. So are you prepared to travel? Do you want to be able to work from home a couple of days a week? What does that look like for you? If you're not clear on that, you won't be clear going to the market what you're looking for. It also helps you, if you have that clearly written down, when you come to make assessments of whether you're going to apply for things, accept things. Does it meet the majority of my criteria? If it doesn't, is it still okay? Is there a good reason why I'd progress with it anyway? The second element is to think about how you're going to go to the market. So there are multiple routes to the job market, recruiter being one, through your connections is another. There are some additional ones. Thinking about what is your strategy. Some people want to use all the routes, some just want to focus on a few, and developing a specific plan for that so it's not random. And making sure you are diarising, following up, and progressing each of the different elements that you've got going on. And I work with my clients very clearly to keep them not only accountable, but to make sure we've got a clear plan and keep a record of it so that we can see what's working out, which avenues are closing. If it's all a bit random, it can become quite demoralizing because it feels like you're getting nowhere. Whereas actually, if you've got a clear record of action you've taken and action you plan to take, you can feel like you're progressing even if you haven't yet got a new role. Job search strategy, when you do that, will depend on where you're at. So you may choose to do it before you do your CV and LinkedIn if you feel you need to do that in-depth thinking before you actually write those. Or you might do it afterwards if your CV and LinkedIn are going to have a clear focus, you know what that is. You might do the job search strategy afterwards, but it does need to happen at some point. And the final element, after you've done all of this and are hopefully getting invited to interviews, is making sure you have a great impact when you go to interviews. So thinking about not only what you're saying, your answers are absolutely key. How are you showcasing all that great experience that you've had and your expertise? But how are you doing that? How are you coming across as an individual? How would the interviewer or interviewers describe you afterwards? Can they see that you're a good fit for their team? Are they experienced enough of you to make a judgment on that? Because of course, good fit matters for them and you. So thinking about what impact you're having, what is your personal impact when you walk in the room, and how are you building on that positively throughout the interview? Of course, the ability to interview well, whether you're just on the phone, on a video call, or in person. So thinking about what the different implications are for each of those. It's very frequent that people have had a very successful career, they've been in a job for a long time and haven't interviewed for ages. So this can feel quite daunting. So mock interview practice, which is what I do with my clients, focusing on what key answers they need to give, as well as how they come across, are absolutely key to perform well. You can't expect to turn up at an interview for the first time in 5 or 10 years and do a great job. It does take practice and is worth considering in advance. So those were the key elements to think about if you're going for a new role. I'd love you to be thinking now, what does that mean for you? Where are you in your career? Are you thinking about going for a new role, or is it something that might be in the next year or two? What do you need to be planning? Do you need to work on your CV, your LinkedIn profile? If you haven't yet received my 9 neglected skills needed for career success short email series and e-booklet, you can request that here, absolutely free. There's a link on there on my website. Just fill out the form and you'll receive that. And new role is one of the 9 skills. There are another 8. There's a page on each skill, so it's full of tips, advice and guidance for you in there. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn because I do put a lot on my website and through my newsletters, but there's additional content on LinkedIn that often doesn't go into either of those other places. And if you've got questions or you'd like to book a 30-minute career booster conversation with me, no obligation at all, but just to talk through where you're at and what you're thinking, and I'll give you some input, then do email me on my email address there. It's also on my website, or you can use the contact form on my website as well, and we can book that in as either a phone or video call. So do feel free to get in touch with me, whether it's now or it's in a few months or even a couple of years' time, and I'll be happy to help. But my big question is, what are you going to do as a result of listening to this webinar today? You listened to it for a reason, and who are you going to ask to support you, whether that's me or other people, whether it be in your network or your mentor, to help you move forward with this topic. Thank you very much for joining today. I really hope it's been useful. If you have any questions, as I said, do get in touch. Many thanks.